Uh, well, Thierry, thank you very much, first of all, for your invitation, and also I have to express my sincere appreciation for the State of Qatar and Foreign Minister of Qatar for organizing this event together with IFRI, which is a very important institute for global affairs, for international relations, which has been in the international community as a big success story, I have to say, and congratulations on doing the World Policy Forum in a very consistent and successful. Actually, I was able to attend the Monaco event, which was 3 or 4 years ago, I remember, and congratulations on doing this time here in Doha, Qatar. Well, what Turkey has gone through this summer in July was quite traumatic, unexpected, quite abrupt. We were faced with a coup attempt. It was not the full military attempting this, but it was a faction within our military tied to Fethullah Gülen, those Gülenists, I would say, who were within our army attempted this, but it was unsuccessful. It failed. I think it was very important for our President Erdogan to make a call for the people to occupy the streets, to occupy the squares of the country, and people responded very fast. And the strong stance of Turkish people, in a way, prevented the coup, which could get really worse. But when we analyze this, why this happened, or who are Gülenists, or who is Fethullah Gülen, this actually dates back to more than 40 years ago. A religious gathering, I would say, which we thought on the visible side was doing good things like schools and charity, social work, solidarity, social solidarity work, and so forth. Not only in Turkey, but around the world. We actually cooperated with them for some time and helped them do more of the things which we thought were good things. And they infiltrated step by step to state organizations. So the followers of Fethullah Gülen got more and more into our government units, our judicial system, our police force, army, and after reaching a certain threshold of occupancy or effect, I would say, then they started to exercise this power for the organization itself. In a way, just capturing the control of the state became more and more of an important agenda for them. And we were kind of careful about what they were doing, especially over the last few years, but we didn't really think that they could go that far to attempt a coup. We lost 241 people, mostly civilians, that night. More than 2,000 people wounded. They hit the parliament building by F-16 aircrafts. They used Sikorsky helicopters, tanks to bomb the presidential palace, our intelligence headquarters, our police force headquarters. And think about any capital in the world, whether it is London or Washington or Paris, in one night, some elements of your own army using the most modern weapons, hitting the most critical state units, so that was quite a trauma for us. And after the 15th of July, we started a very important process. It's a massive operation of the police force and our judicial system nowadays, trying to pick the people who are involved with this organization. And now we call them FETÖ, a terrorist organization, since they even used weapons to destabilize the country. So we are now going through a big effort to make sure that the followers of Gülen or members of this terrorist organization are no longer in critical positions in the government system. But the thing is, they can hide themselves very well. It's a very secretive organization. And the problem with this organization, like some other terrorist organizations in the Islamic world, is that in the mainstream Islamic thinking, our target has to be legitimate, religiously legitimate, and every step that we take towards that target has to be also legitimate, religiously legitimate. But FETÖ and some other terrorist organizations in the Islamic world, unfortunately, if they have a legitimate target, they can do every kind of nasty things, all kinds of religiously illegal things to reach that target. And I think it's a big sickness that the Muslim world has to deal with, and Islamic thinkers has to work on very, very carefully. Another important element with this organization is that they think that their leader is like Messiah or the awaited one. So when they get an order, the followers turn into robots or zombies, so they don't even think. Actually, in Islam, thinking and our minds, using our brains, is a big gift which differentiates us from all the other being creatures. So in these kind of organizations, the followers are asked to stop thinking, close their minds, lock their minds, and do every kind of crazy thing. So this is also a sickness, that's also a big flaw that we have to deal with. And this is not just for FETÖ, I think for Daesh, for Al-Qaeda or other organizations, this is something which needs a serious dealing with. So what we are going through is not easy, because on one hand, Turkey signed up to all the important values and ideals like democracy, human rights, freedoms, rule of law. And since 2002, from the very beginning of AK Party, we were very careful to improve ourselves on these areas, together with improving our domestic security situation and being more careful about, of course, our external security situation also. So we didn't want to really make a trade-off between security and freedoms and so forth so far. But this is such a unique event that, like France did after the Paris bombings, we had to declare an emergency rule in the country. And under the emergency rule, the mood is, of course, security first. And when there is a security first approach, then there are some probably criticism coming from and there. But the number one priority right now in Turkey is to restrain the stability, making sure that our domestic security situation gets back to normal, because not only our domestic security situation is important, but on our Syrian border, we have two important terror organizations right across the border, Daesh and YPG, PYD, or PKK, as we call them in Turkey, which are right on our border. And Syria is a huge regional threat for many countries, not only for Turkey. So on one hand, we are dealing with this domestic issue, and on the other hand, we are also dealing with Syria and also how things will evolve in Iraq, as well as in Yemen and Libya. And so it's not easy times in this part of the world, but this part of the world is also the region of Europe. And we hope that our European colleagues and friends have more input and support in the solution of some of these issues, that's why also I think having this WPC here in Doha has a very special meaning.
Thank you very much. To make the transition with foreign policy issues, the fact is that in terms of perception, Turkey is, President Erdogan are perceived very often as having overreacted with tens of thousands of people displaced, arrested, etc., etc. And the result is that there is a sense of crisis in the relationship with Europe, with the European Union. We will see that in the next few days, maybe. There are talks about restoring the death penalty, in which case that would be incompatible with the belonging of Turkey to the Council of Europe, which is of which Turkey was a founding father. That very few people maybe know that. So it's a relatively difficult situation. And of course, with the US, there is the question of what President-elect Trump will do. Will he abide by the request of extraditing Gulen? I'm not even sure that he has the power to do it himself, by the way. There is a legal problem here. But be that as it may, there could be some serious, I say there could be, because some serious diplomatic problems, both with the EU and with the US. And at the same time, the relationship between Turkey and the West is becoming more and more important. In the case of Europe, we have the refugee issue, we have the Middle East situation. So how do you see interaction between these domestic problems in Turkey and this quite complicated international situation, particularly with the West?
Well, unfortunately, the world is going through a deglobalization process nowadays. So many countries looking more and more just inward, being disintegrated from each other. The world trade, the global trade, used to increase double the size of the global growth, but now the world trade is increasing at par or even less than the growth of the global economy. So in a way, countries or regions are becoming more and more compartmentalized, and populism is on the rise. Nationalism, as our Prime Minister Davutoglu already mentioned in the opening session, so this populism, nationalism, and in every country blaming outsiders for whatever is going wrong in the country is a big, big problem. So the big turmoil that the Middle East is going through, unfortunately, coincides with such a deglobalization process that the world is going through. Even when we look at the European Union, the 2008-2009 crisis, the Eurozone crisis made so many countries inevitably too much occupied with their domestic issues that enough attention in Middle East and North Africa probably was not paid. And when the Arab Spring started, as Turkey, we felt quite lonely in a way, defending and expressing the very European values to our Middle Eastern and North African neighbors. But transformation in this part of the world is not easy. Like in Eastern Europe, when the transformation happened after the Soviet Union, many countries became part of EU, became part of NATO, but a huge political and economic support has been given to those countries, and they were promised a better welfare, they were promised better circumstances for their citizens. Poland today gets grants of about 3 to 4% of GDP from the EU, and Poland is quite an advanced economy nowadays, but they still get a grant from the EU to continue with the transformation. So for Middle East and North Africa, that was not unfortunately given. Another problem, I think, is the deficit of leadership in the world. That has played a key role in the deterioration of the process, and the nationalism and populism is also a result of lack of leadership in quite a few countries. In Turkey, luckily, we don't have that problem. So we have a very strong leadership, and this strong leadership has been quite influential in transforming the countries since 2002. But also, I think it's important to understand the domestic and regional circumstances of Turkey, and why you mentioned like civil servants being laid off from government units and so forth. But in these difficult times, sometimes it becomes necessary, like what happened in Eastern Germany, when the Eastern and Western Germany were being reunified. Hundreds of thousands of civil servants were laid off in order to clear the Nazi mentality from the state system. So in terms of our domestic security situation right now, FETÖ and PKK, two biggest threats, and sometimes to make sure that those threats really go away, you have to do these kind of things. As I said, our mood right now is security first mood. But this will change, and we hope that the European Union also goes back to the founding values, and I think the world does need a strong European Union, in my view. Especially after the Second World War, the European Union emerged as a very important peace project. Countries fighting with each other, after millions and millions of people died, they were able to find some common areas of interest, some common interests which they can build on. It started with coal and steel, very simple subjects maybe. Then it turned into an economic entity, common market, and then European Economic Community, then European Community, finally European Union. So common economic interests were at the very fundamentals of European Union emerging as a very important success story. And now I'm afraid we are losing it, because the feeling of when we are together, we benefit all. This feeling is now evaporating in many European Union member states, like what happened in the Brexit vote. 52% of the British people thought that being together with the EU does no longer help UK. Actually, being a member of the EU is a cost, not a benefit, so why don't we get out? So if this feeling of not any longer having the common benefits of being together is not good. So this is a very dangerous trend that we are observing. As Turkey, it's a very big pity for us, because we had a strong EU anchor, external anchor, which helped us a lot to transform ourselves in rule of law, in human rights, freedoms, in how our democracy functions. And now that important external anchor, or a big target, is also evaporating in front of our eyes as a very important magnet. And the soft power of the EU, the leverage of the EU on the neighborhood, is also evaporating together with the deteriorating solidarity within the EU. So it is not easy times in our region, and also within Turkey. But I think this is not also a missed opportunity. We still have to be hopeful. We have to work a lot. There are, I think, still a lot of people in this region and around the world who are good global thinkers, and what kind of a better region and better world that we can achieve. And we have to move forward.